Good evening and welcome to day two of the NERx Virtual Convention, the 2020 Annual Convention of the NLRA Northeastern Region. I am Chuck Diljak and I will be your host for this evening's program. Like day one of this convention, we will present another fun-filled evening of clinics, layout tours, and recognize members from around the region for their accomplishments. The Northeastern region includes the 6 New England states, most of New York, half of New Jersey, a little bit of Pennsylvania, and most of the eastern Canadian provinces. Our members in the region are the stars for all 4 nights of the convention, presenting clinics and taking us on tours of their layouts. I encourage you to share comments and ask questions using the chat feature in YouTube or Facebook as you watch and listen to our clinics and tours this week. We will do our best to get the questions to the presenter at the end of each session. And now, sit back with your favorite beverage and let's get this train out of the station. Yesterday, we started the convention with a clinic on building trees for the foreground. Tonight, we start the evening with another scenery clinic entitled Basic Scenery Tips. The clinician is a member of the Hudson Berkshire Division, Great Northern Railway Historical Society, and Albany N-Track Club. He has been active in the train hobby since the early 90s and loves sharing the hobby with others. In the past 10 years, he has been working towards building an N-scale basement layout, which you will see tomorrow night on a layout tour. The layout has been operational for the past 5 years with regular operating sessions until recently. He is modeling the prototype from Whitefish to Shelby, Montana, along the border of Glacier National Park in the 1950s. His favorite parts of the hobby are building scenery and operations. So please welcome Doug Diedrich.
Hey, everybody.
I guess we can start Doug's video right now.
Hi, and welcome to How To Videos. My name is Doug, and today I'm going to talk to you about basic scenery, taking your scenery from your plaster to ground foam to static grass and eventually planting some trees. Next to me is an area that I've been working on. You notice that I have some photos taped to the wall. These are reference photos, and the reference photos give you a great way of visualizing what it is that you're trying to do. So we're going to take this area right here from the plaster and build it up. So if you're ready, I'm ready, so let's get started. So I've got myself a can of some inexpensive brown paint. This we're going to use as the base coat for the plaster. Sometimes what I like to do is actually paint it, let it dry, and then paint it again. And the second time is when I would put flocking on it and some dirt or sand. That gives you that texture. So I'll grab a paintbrush. Oh, make sure that you cover your track or cover any area. You notice that I do have some plastic up on the wall so I don't splash any paint up on my painted backdrop. So we're just going to give this a nice coat of some paint. Put that on there. You can see the area that I've already done here as far as flocking and putting a dirt base coat on it. So we'll give this a nice base coat, we'll let it dry, and then we'll come back, we'll do a second coat, and on the second coat, that's when we'll flock it and put some texture to it by adding some sand. Okay, so the first coat has dried, we're ready to put on the second coat. The reason why I use 2 coats of paint is, one, to make sure that I get good coverage on the plaster. Sometimes when you do that first coat of paint, you get the nooks and crannies that don't quite get the paint in them, and when it dries, you have these white spots. And that's the last thing you want, is to have white spots on your scenery. The second reason is because the first coat dries quickly, the plaster absorbs that paint. So the second coat doesn't dry as quick, and you have more time to put on your sand and then your ground foam. When you're working in areas such as this, you want to work in small areas. So you would paint a small section, you would put your dirt on, and then you would flock it and then move along. So right here we have a small area that we're going to work. We'll paint it, and then we'll apply the sand, which I have right here. This is some local sand. You can use dirt from the area that you're modeling, or it's good to match a color of what you're trying to do. That's your base color. So again, we started out with a dark brown, and I have a darker sand to match that brown. On top of that, we're going to use some Woodland Scenic blend. I blended two fine material. T44 and T45 are the two that I use. And mix it up, 50-50 blend, and that's what we'll be adding to this small section. We're going to slop some paint on here. We're just going to make sure, and you can go, if you've got an area that you've already done, I go right up to it and maybe even over the top of it a little bit, because you're going to recover that with your ground foam and your sand, in this case. Dirt, if you were using just regular soil or dirt. So I want to make sure that I get all the area, get in those nooks and crannies that you may have missed that first time. But I'm going to give this a good healthy coat of paint. You want that paint to be wet, so when you apply your material, it's going to have time to dry and stick to it. All right, so we got on a good coat of paint. I like my coverage. And now we're just going to apply this sand. In this case, I'm just going to pinch my fingers in here and sprinkle it over the top of it. And you don't want to do too much unless that's, an area that you're going to show and just have a bare ground. Otherwise, you just want to kind of give it a little texture. And then we're going to do the same with the ground foam. Again, I'm going to pinch my fingers and just kind of sprinkle some of that on there. Sometimes what I like to do is actually take and just tap the cup, and that kind of gives you a little bit more and gives you a little bit better coverage. You don't want to do too much. You don't want to blop it on. Make sure you get that edge where you paint it into the other section that was already done. Okay. Okay, so once you have your base coat down, which is your paint, your gravel, and your fine flocking, you're going to start building your scenery up from that point. I like using static grass. Static grass comes in a couple different sizes. We have 2.5 millimeter, which is very small. And remember, I'm doing N scale, so I don't want the grass to overpower the figures of the buildings or the cars and engines themselves. So I used 2.5, but I used a 2.5 as a base, and I like using a 2.5 for further back. The further away you go, obviously, you want to use smaller material. The closer to the front of the layout, you want to use the higher grass and, you know, the bigger trees and that kind of stuff. You're trying to create force perspective. So again, we have a 6mm that I use for the foreground. It also comes in 4mm, which you can use for the intermediate parts. Another thing that you want to make sure you do is don't use one color. In nature, if you look, there's a variety of colors and textures. Not everything is completely the same color. Trees, grass, you name it, it comes in a variety of shades and colors. And that's what you want to do to create realistic scenery. Create a variety of textures and colors. As you can see here, I have some lighter green and some darker green. I have bare spots. I have some different shades of dirt and sand, all to create that realistic perspective. So as we apply the static grass, I like to work again in areas, but I like to take that smaller grass to 2.5 and just work with that, and I'll bring it right to the foreground. So I spread it out in the area that I'm doing, and then I'll take my taller grasses and work that. Now, what I want to add to that is, even though you have done an area with the 2.5 static grass, you can build off of that. You can go back over that with your other grasses and create a blend and a mixture of different grass height. I like doing that. Again, that gives you that color variation and texture. Okay, so if we let our paint and our sand and flocking dry, and we're ready to put on that static grass. So you're going to need a static grass applicator. This is mine. It's homemade. There's a number of commercial applicators out there. So in order for the grass to stick to your scenery, you're going to have to use either some white glue, or what I have is some matte medium. This is concentrate. I've already diluted some in a spray bottle. This is my spray bottle applicator, and I'm just going to spray the area that I want to apply the grass to. Another tool that you're going to want to have handy is a small vacuum. The vacuum will help clean up the area, number one, and number two, I use it to help pull up that grass to get that grass to stand up straight. You do have the applicator, and that works, but I noticed that the vacuum helps create that as well. So we filled this up with some 2mm static grass. On one end of the applicator, you'll need to have a nail or something to stick in to your scenery to clip it to your applicator so that it will create that static electricity. So we're going to stick this right in here, anywhere you can get a spot. It's already connected, and we're going to start applying some grass. So I'm going to spray the area with my spray. That looks pretty good. Get it wet, not wet so that it's running off, but you want to get some wetness there. And then it's just a matter of turning on the applicator and applying that grass. I give it some taps. Bring that grass out. It takes a fair amount of shaking to get that smaller 2mm grass to fall nicely. And we're going to take the vacuum now and just kind of go over that. One thing you want to be careful is you don't want to get the vacuum too close, because then you're going to suck up and have like a crop circle in your scenery. So just take it and run that around. Clean that area up a little bit. Next, we're going to put down a little taller 6mm grass. This is right along the track. We're going to do this area in here, and we're going to do this area up in here. So I want that grass, that tall grass, it's closer to the front of the layout. Where we're not going to touch is toward the backdrop. So I put in the grass. We've got it turned on. And we're just going to start laying some of that taller grass down. The next step is we're going to want to build this up. I want to take this area and actually create some bushes. The way we're going to do that is we're going to use a product from Woodland Scenic called polyfiber. This polyfiber material can be teased out, spread out, and laid over an area, and you want to kind of keep it fluffed. So we're just going to kind of work this little area right here. Once we put this on, I'm going to flock it with some Scenic Express ground foam. It just will lay up on top of that and create that type of bush that we're looking to create. So I want to lay this out and kind of have it hanging over this little edge here to create a bush on top of a little hill. So I like that, the way that position there. I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to spray it again with my matte medium. And I just like spraying it right in my hand. Get a little matte medium on that. And we're going to lay that on top of there. You don't want to press it down. You want it to kind of stay high to create that kind of a bush effect. I've got it laid on there. I'm going to take another squirt of matte medium. The first time I sprayed the matte medium, I sprayed the underside, the side that was going to go against the grass. I sprayed that so I could get that to stick to the grass. Now I'm spraying the top of it, so when I go to flock it, the flocking will stick to the top of the poly. And we're just going to take a little of this material, and again I'm just going to pinch it between my thumb and two fingers, and you want to really control how much you put on there. I am just very lightly sprinkling that on, and I go a little bit over onto the grass too to kind of blend in the grass with that bush. You don't want too much. You want to create an kind of an airy feel to the bush, so it can you can look through it. created that bush. I'm also going to use a little coarse turf from Woodland Scenic. This is T63. It comes in a variety of colors. And again, now we're mixing the different colors. This is a very light green compared to some of the darker greens. It shows up well on that bush. And I'm going to just take and again, just with my fingers, sprinkle some of this heavier material in here in a few places. That's the coarse ground foam. And mist that. Hold it up. You don't want to get too much matte medium on. Again, you don't want to overspray the area because then it's just going to puddle and pull down the grass, and you don't want to do that. And some of this material will end up sticking, and when you go to use your vacuum, it will be fine, and other stuff will come up. And you can go back over an area if you think you need more of it. The problem is if you put too much on in the beginning and you spray it down, then it's harder to take away. It's better to add than to take away. I want to do another little area right here next to the bridge abutment. So we'll take another little patch of polyfiber, we'll lay that on there. I don't want to spray the abutment with my matte medium. I don't need anything to stick to that. So I'm just going to take a paper towel and kind of lay that right there. We talked about having variety. You don't want to do your entire area with the same bush. Although there would be a lot of this type of bush in this area, you want variety. So I'm going to take that polyfiber and we're going to do a little area up here, but I'm going to flock it with something different. I've got the piece of poly, I've sprayed it, I've laid it down. I'm covering over this rock because again, I don't want to get any matte medium on that. I'm just spraying this bush a little bit more. Next, I'm going to flock it with a material from Scenic Express. This is called Super Leaf. It comes in a variety of colors. And you can see that makes a pretty nice bush. Now, a word of caution. Don't take your vacuum and try to suck up any loose material around your polyfiber, because you'll suck that polyfiber right off the layout. So we've taken this area from just plaster, we painted it, we flocked it, we put some gravel on it, or some dirt. We did some static grass. We added polyfiber, some coarse material, a little finer material on the polyfiber. I'm ready to plant a tree. I have an awl. Just punch a hole and start planting some of your trees. So that about wraps it up for our how-to video on basic scenery tips. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did, and I look forward to seeing you next time. For now, please, everyone, stay safe.
Wow, Doug, that was great watching all that scenery. I do have some questions for you. What
Okay.
step, what steps do you take to visualize the scenery for an area of your layout?
Well, in the beginning, you'll notice that I had some photos up on the back wall. I use a lot of reference photos to kind of visualize what I'm trying to do, even as far as colors, colors of rocks, the color of the grass. You want your layout to blend. So, that you have to be careful with that. But I like using the photos.
Okay, that's good to know. And I saw you're using static grass, which seems to be very popular these last few years. It can be a little bit messy to work with. Do you have any tips on recapturing any of the static grass that isn't glued down?
Yeah, actually, I do. You're right. Static grass can be pretty messy. It kind of gets all over the place. Um, so what I use to kind of clean things up is I have a little vacuum and I take an old stocking, one of my wife's nylon stockings, and don't grab a new one. So you want to grab an old one, and just cut a little piece off, and I shove it in the end of the vacuum hose. So as I am vacuuming up the loose static grass, it collects in the stocking, and then I'm able to pull that stocking out of the vacuum hose and put it in a container to save what I can. Now you'll lose some of the grass, obviously. Some is going to be sucked through the vacuum, but that helps collect a lot of it, and it works very well.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Because I haven't tried static grass, so I'll have to try that
Yeah,
soon.
definitely try that. And static grass isn't cheap, so you want to try to keep as much as you can and not waste it. So
Right, right.
it does help. And when you do that, you'll vacuum up some maybe loose rocks and stuff. So you might have to pick through it a little bit for next
Hmm.
time you use it, but at least you have it to use. So.
Okay, okay, great. Being an N-scale modeler, what challenges and benefits do you see in building scenery versus other scales?
So we had Jeff Giroux on last night, and Jeff did a great clinic on foreground trees. One thing when it comes to scale is we look at trees, and a lot of times I've noticed that trees aren't really the size they should be for the scale. So by having N scale, it allows you to put things in more of a perspective as far as size goes. So, an overall scene, which is what I'm trying to create, I want that mountain scenery. I don't think I could do that in HO, at least not the way that I wanted to. So with N scale, you're able to, uh, I would say, scale everything else around it a little bit better.
Okay, okay. And what's interesting about your biography when I read it and earlier is that it mentions that you're interested in both scenery and operations, which is a lot. You go to a lot of layouts and the owner is probably more interested in operations and you see less scenery, and you see I go to other layouts where person is more interested in scenery and less on operations, but you're interested in both. Can you expand on that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think the scenery part comes from my um liking art. I've always been involved in art. I used to draw when I was a kid. I've always had a little flair for art. So that part is the artistic part of it. The scenery is the artistic. You actually have a canvas, but it's a 3D canvas. And I love creating that 3D canvas,
Mm.
making the scene come to life. And so, speaking of that, when you have the trains, in order to make the layout come to life, I think operation brings the whole layout to life. You have the scenery, but then you have the trains. But to really top it off is to make that scenery and that train come to life by operation, true to life.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
like both. I love doing the scenery and I love doing the operation.
Okay, well, great. Well, we look forward to seeing your layout tomorrow. How do you model the scenery? I mean, we talked about it a little bit with the first question, visualizing your layout.
Right.
Here you're modeling Montana, but you live in New England. How do you model the scenery of a region that is so far away from where you live?
Good question. It's a combination of things. It's definitely research. You have to do a little research. I did research by reading some books on the area that I wanted to model. And then it's taking a trip out to Montana and taking lots and lots and lots of reference photos. I can't say enough about the reference photos. You can shoot 100 photos. You may only use two of those photos, but you'll find that those photos are invaluable as far as you trying to create a scene, or at least the feel of the scene. By me modeling a prototype, it does help, but it doesn't matter whether you're doing a prototype or if you're doing freelance, because you can take pictures of any scenery outside, mountains, streams, ponds, whatever, and create that same thing on a model. So really, that's what it's about. It's about reference photos and material, and just research, and trying to get as much information on what something looks like. Everything's a model, right? I mean,
Yeah.
buildings are models, trees are models, grass is a model, as far as the model railroader goes. So it's good to learn how that model looks true to life.
Okay. Well, we have a couple more minutes. One last question. It
Sure.
came up on both Facebook and YouTube. What's the deal with that applicator, the static grass applicator? What is that?
I actually got that from an alien that dropped down in the backyard. I touched on it a little bit in the video about static grass applicators, and there's a lot of different applicators out there, but you can make your own, and that's what mine is. I made that myself, out of some PVC parts and plastic, and yeah, it doesn't look good, but it does the trick. It really works, and if you want to learn how to do or make a static grass applicator, go to YouTube. There's a bunch of videos on how to make a static grass applicator. Um, yeah, that's where that thing came from.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome clinic, Doug, and
Thank
thanks
you.
for kicking off day two. And
My pleasure.
we're in a couple minutes. We'll start up on our first layout tour.
Okay. Well, thank
Thank you,
you.
Doug. Now we're going to switch from a presenter that models an N scale to a modeler O scale. This segment is a layout tour of the O scale two-rail Buckeye Railroad. This layout has been featured in Model Railroader, Great Model Railroads, O Scale Trains Magazine, and O Gauge Railroading Magazine, just to name a few. The layout is 40 by 56 and operates on the premise that the Pittsburgh and Lake Erie did not exist, requiring the New York Central to reach Pittsburgh via the Buckeye. The layout is built for operation and is fully scenic. Now let's visit the Buckeye Railroad and Herm Birdsall.
Perspective is I have it on slide. I mean, it looks like it shoots. Yeah. Yeah.
hear spinning, like 200 miles spin across the
Wow, that layout of Herms is a beautiful layout. That's the layout that I'd like to see someday. Up next is our second clinic for this evening called Coal, Cod, and Cash. The presenter is a past superintendent of the Little Rhodey Division and a member of the NER Board of Directors, currently working on his MMR. His HO layout under construction will mirror aspects of the old colony on Aquidneck Island. He models in HO, N, and F scales. A retired district court judge, the presenter's other interests include mental health advocacy, gaming with his adult children, and elections law reform, having served 6 years on the Rhode Island Board of Elections. We welcome Steve Erickson.
But of all that, it's trains that I like the best. So, you know, so great to see everybody. I don't actually see people, but great to be here. What I'm doing today is something that Peter asked me to do about one of the areas of interest I have, which is going to be the basis for parts of the model railroad I've currently got under construction. And this is something that I think will be of interest to people because this is an example of something you very rarely see, which is a virtually totally coastal railroad, essentially a point-to-point between Newport and Fall River, part of the old colony route and Fall River Railroad, which became eventually part of the New Haven. But for a great deal of its existence, it was an independent railroad that ran between Newport and Fall River. So we're going to learn a little bit about the history of this railroad and some of its truly unique industries and some of its interesting structures with some ideas for design and what you can incorporate into a coastal railroad. So let's get started with that. And first of all, we're going to take a map here and look at what was basically the old colony and Newport Railway and its connections. You can see Newport down there at the bottom, going up to Boston. You also see in red something that says Fall River Line to New York. And that's the old Fall River Line steamship company. And for many years, steamships ran between Newport, Fall River, and New York, and sometimes up to Boston. And it was a way for people who lived in New York to come to their summer homes in Newport or to commute to Boston and that area and north from there. So this was really an area Newport served as kind of a focal point for people moving up and down the coast, either by steamship or by rail line, to what we know to be Newport's mansions and summer houses and summer cottages that people lived in. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of the area we're in. Lots of people have do model different parts of the old colony, but this part that I'm going to talk about, which is specifically the part, and this is a blow up, so it's a little fuzzy, between Newport and Fall River, and you can see there are about 5 stations there on a very big blob, and that blob is Aquidneck Island. Aquidneck Island is made up of 3 towns: Newport, Middletown, Portsmouth. And the railroad went through all 3 of them, then across the Saconnet River, which is not a river. We'll talk about that in a minute, over to Fall River. And in Fall River, it intersected with the railroad, the rest of the old colony heading up to Boston and other parts, including a side division over there to Providence. So that gives you a little sense of the scenery. So the southern terminus is in Newport, and here's a picture of Newport, more or less as it is today. Newport's always been a seaport. It was a seaport during revolutionary times, and it's the end of the line because, you know, it's down there on the south coast, and so it's the end of a lot of things. There's a lot of industry. There was a lot of industry, a lot of fishing. We call this coal, cod, and cash because you're going to see a coastal coal mine, which is not something that people normally think of. When they think of coal mining, they think of mountains, they think of hills, they think of those sorts of things. They don't think about a flatland coal mine on the coast, but that's what we had here on Aquidneck Island. So the southern terminus was Newport. Now, the terminus of the railroad is an absolutely delightful thing to think about trying to model, or to give you some ideas for modeling not only an intermodal port, but a very high focused industry area. And I'm going to show you some pictures now of the area where the railroad grew over a period of time, mostly by filling in various parts of what was a cove as it gradually took over various areas, as the industries in those areas gradually took over more space. So here's a map, an early map of Newport. Now you're going to notice some really interesting things about this. First of all, there's a big cove in the middle up above. There's a baseball field there now, and then there's water with the rail lines going through the water, leading down to two piers, or two large entities, and that's where the steamships came in. That's where the various industries, the fishing, the oil, because all the oil had to be brought in, the coal had to be brought in one way or another. Into Newport, and Newport, because it was a big fishing port, had facilities there as well. And if you look down there at the bottom, you're going to see something really great, which is a turntable reversed with the entrance through the back and terminating apparently in the water. And so I looked at that and I said, I got to find some more pictures of this. So I did some more research on this. And I found this particular picture, which absolutely shows the turntable with the rail line running through the top of the horseshoe, and then further trackage on the far side of the turntable in the roundhouse, actually heading very close to the water. So this is where Newport started to become a fairly large industrial center. This is what it started to look like. So by the time we got to say the 1950s or 60s, this photo from, as you can see from the Digital Commonwealth collections online, shows what had happened after it had been filled in. This is after the railroad's gone, but you can still see all the railroad lines going into the two piers. You can still see what we call Long Wharf, which is that long straight part down below, which was fronted by a whole series of industries, including a meat packing facility, including ice companies, obviously, a lot of different industries, ships, chandleries, and other industries that were associated with the commercial fishing industry, and with the general nature of the area, which was agricultural. So you had a meat packing plant because there were farms, and there were cows, and there was fish. So you have a lot of options here in terms of different types of industries, and it gives you a nice terminus to the railroad if you start thinking about how that all fits together. This is a close-up. It shows again some remnants of what was there. This is, I think, probably in the 60s. It's been totally redeveloped now. It's a Marriott hotel. It's one of the crown jewels of the Newport tourism industry. But back in the 50s and 60s, it was still a railroad yard. And the biggest part of it was that long stretch that went along the coast, which was called Long Wharf. And here's where the shipping industry had its headquarters. Here's where the Fall River Line had its headquarters. If you look in the back of this photo to the left, what you see is a steamship. It's one of the steamships from the old Fall River Line that went between New York and Boston and mainly stopped in Newport and Fall River. But this whole area was just constantly being redeveloped over and over again with various levels of industry, right from the 1850s right up through the 1960s and 70s. So you've got a wide range of different eras that you can use, and you've got a wonderfully diverse set of buildings. Now, the next building I'm going to show you is the Newport passenger station. Now, you're not going to have seen a passenger station that looks like this. I can guarantee you. You know, you see all those kits, you see all those buildings, you see everything that says, this is a passenger station. Well, you have never seen anything like this one. This is a passenger station. It was long, it was low, it had a flat roof, it had these two weird things on the top of them. It looks like, I don't know, a Masonic temple or something, as far as I can tell. It was not Gilded Age Newport by any stretch of the imagination. It was very functional. It was 3 or 4 small little buildings connected with throughways, but that was the station. Wonderful thing to try and model because it's so different from what we think of when we think about passenger and freight stations. So I've got a couple of different views of this, and I think it's worth spending a little bit of time looking at how this building was put together, because like I said, it's not something you see every day. This is a picture from the other side of it, and it gives you obviously they have a little doodle bug there when this was taken, and it shows you that the whole station, with all those little buildings connected together through the underpasses, really not much longer than a doodle bug. So you've got a small station with some passenger, with some areas where the passengers can wait, some waiting areas, but and two marvelously bizarre things on the top of it. And I have no idea. Nobody has been able to figure out why they were that way, why one's different, one's flat, one's peaked, one's got what looks like, I don't know, a lightning rod on it. But that was the station for Newport. I've got one more shot of it here to help. This is a little dark, but again, it shows the top pieces. So if you're looking for an interesting station to model in a way that you've never seen something before, that certainly would do it. So the railroad went from Newport to Fall River. The old colony used to end in Fall River. What happened was the people in Newporters wanted to have the railroad come to Newport. But the old colony wasn't interested in building the line because it meant building a bridge across what we're going to see is called the Sakonnet River onto Aquidneck Island, and then obtaining a right-of-way down Aquidneck Island. Well, it turned out that what happened was a bunch of Newporters got together and they pooled some resources and they bought the right-of-way. And the right-of-way they bought was the entire west coast, the west shore of the island. Now, you can only imagine today what some of that property would be worth if they developed it instead of putting in a right-of-way for a railroad. But they bought the entire right-of-way from Fall River to Newport privately and gave it to the railroad so that they would build the railroad down to Newport. A lot of that area was then taken over in the 40s and 50s by the Navy. So the railroad wound up going through the naval base, which proved to be a bit of a problem as time went on. But it also gave us some other industries that can be used and some things that we don't normally model, which are kind of interesting. Before I get to that, I'm just going to show you, I think I got one or two more slides of the freight yard. This is when it's all been filled in. You've got the steamship line, the big square building. You've got a steamship in the background. You can see they were pretty big paddle wheel steamships that went along the coast for a number of years. And you've got, if you look closely, you can see the roundhouse, and you can see the access from the back of the roundhouse to the turntable, which, like I said, is unusual. So it really doesn't take a lot of space to model this kind of an intermodal facility. So this is another one of the maps that show this stuff. And again, it shows the location of Long Wharf. It shows how the railroad line came in. There was a maintenance facility for the engines. There was the roundhouse. There was the turntable. And at this point, there was still water, but that all was filled in eventually and converted to business. But you can just imagine, like I said, you can imagine the engine getting into the roundhouse and just backing up a little more. And if they just keep backing up on the turntable, eventually they're going to wind up, well, in the water. So this is certainly something that would be fun to model. And actually, it gives you access points right into the middle of it because of those two long piers. So here's a picture of the roundhouse and the turntable. Sometime early, this is an early old colony engine, obviously. So the new train station, and some of you may have seen this, where they do the dinner train and various other things, is located nearby. It's the terminus of the tourist railroad, the old colony in Newport, which is currently suspended operations for obvious reasons. But this building is not a railroad station. This is not the original railroad station. I showed you that one before. What it is, it's a building that was the caretaker's cottage of a cemetery that was on the line of the railroad, and then moved down to Newport to become this small railroad station. And it's, again, another great little building to model, a little bit different, very small, very compact, would do the job quite nicely. So, but then as we go north, we get from Newport, we go into Middletown, which is the town I live in. And they had some very unusual stations. And here's the Middletown station that existed prior to the Navy ripping all this off and out of existence and putting in a fleet facility. So as you can see, it's sort of a modified house. It's got a post office in it. And there were a couple of buildings like this on the line. And again, we're only talking about 14 or 15 miles total from Newport all the way up to Fall River, which, we on the island, we say it's all the way up to Fall River because it's 14 miles away because we're in Rhode Island, and anything that involves crossing a bridge is an overnight trip requiring a passport. But there were 3 or 4 of these stations like this. I'm going to show you this one. I'm going to show you one at Bristol Ferry, which is north of where this station was. So this is Middletown. Now, the thing about an island, if you have industries, the thing about an island is you don't have rivers. Well, you have rivers, but they're what most people would call creeks, or drainage ditches, probably be more accurate. But they call them rivers, but they're certainly not going to power anything. So being a coastal railroad, being a coastal community, the industries were often powered by wind. And so if you looked at Aquidneck Island through much of its history, you would see windmills for grain purposes, to provide power for various activities. So windmills were a fairly common thing. So now you've got a coastal railroad with an intermodal facility, and you got windmills. All right. So, but they're not just any windmills, because, and I love some of these windmills that we've had on the island, because they're not what you call 4-vane windmills. You can model an 8-vane windmill. And yes, this is in Rhode Island, an 8-vane, and we still have them today. We have a couple of restored 8-vane windmills. This is from the Middletown Historical Society's site, and it shows an operating 8-vane windmill that still exists in one of the parks in Middletown. So if you want to do something different that's a distinctive point of interest, you can put a windmill in the background. Not one of those Dutch ones, but one of these cedar shingled ones with the 8 vanes that we had quite all across the island at one point. And so then I talked about the Navy, and I said, well, then the Navy came in and it ripped out a lot of what used to be the coastal area. But that didn't mean that the rail service ended, because if you see this aerial view, this is what's called Pier 1 at the Newport Navy Base. And as you can see there, if you look closely, you can see that there are two tracks, one on each side of the pier with a crossover in the middle, which is how they used to service the cruisers and the destroyers that were part of the Atlantic Fleet that were housed in Newport. So for quite a long time into the 1950s, the Navy got its supplies via rail directly onto the piers that serviced the fleet. So this is something we don't often see modeled, but is an example of something that would certainly be a major point of interest if you decided to model even a small portion of a naval base. This is what the cruiser destroyer force looked like pre-1973, when they basically moved all those ships out of Newport. It was a major economic impact. But the smaller of the two piers, the one to the right in this photograph, is Pier 1. And that's the one with the rail service. Pier 2 was built later. It didn't have rail service, but most of the destroyers, as you can see, are tied up to Pier 1. And the cruisers, the larger ships, are tied up to Pier 2. So you've got the real possibility of at least suggesting naval activity, the use of naval rail cars and so forth in order to supply these ships that were a major part of the economic environment of Newport County. So, but here's the really cool stuff. There was a coal mine in Portsmouth. Now, this coal mine is about 15 feet off sea level elevation, and it's not a small coal mine. It's a big coal mine. You can't say a lot about the coal, but there was this coal mine, and most people would not imagine that there would be such a facility on the coast here in southern New England, but it existed. It made the New York Times. New England's latest industry is a Rhode Island coal mine. Of course, in the article, they were a little bit less enthusiastic because, as you can see, the Mount Hope coal mine in Portsmouth contains the hardest anthracite in the country, if not the world. So it's truly distinctive. Hardest anthracite. It would not burn. So the coal mine existed. It was there for a very long time. It mainly made money by selling stock for the owners, selling off stock issues. It certainly had a tendency to destroy engines who tried to use it for fuel or even regular boilers. So it was a major industry, but it wasn't a very successful industry, but it was there right on the coast. And as I was saying before, you had a lot of pumps in operation. Today, that area is a golf course. It used to be a Weyerhaeuser factory. It went from being the coal mine to being nothing to being a Weyerhaeuser factory. Now it's a coal mine, and so now it's a golf course. And occasionally they have these sink pits in the golf course because there's still tunnels underneath that go out actually underneath the water. Where they were trying to mine the coal. So it was a definite hand operation. People went in there from a surface pit and then went straight under to fairly shallow mine faces. So it was a terrible coal. It was just terrible coal. This shows the rail at that location. It was called Arnold's Point. You can see there was a siding. It was it was a company town. It had company store, company houses, the coal mine. It looked, it was very much replicating that sort of Pennsylvania model, but in a coastal community. So you can put that coal mine right on the shore if you want, and you're going to be prototypical. And next to it, there was a copper works. Again, there's no trace of this left, but it's a wonderful building. It was right on the coast. So as you move up Aquidneck Island from Newport through Middletown, where you had those stations in the Navy base, and into Portsmouth, as you're moving north, heading toward Fall River, you get into this coal mine, you get into the copper works, and then you get into an area that's now called Melville. Some of you might remember that Melville was where the PT boats used to train during World War II. And it's where John F. Kennedy trained to write PT 109, for those of us who remember the stories of the Kennedy presidency and his exploits during World War II. So we're going north from the copper works into Melville. Now, Melville at one point was not a PT training facility like it was in World War II, not a commercial resort area, marina like it is today. It was a major refueling station at one point for the Atlantic Fleet when it operated on coal. And again, there are these facilities, there are these things that we don't see today, but they were there. And that was the coaling station for a major part of the Atlantic Fleet. Fortunately, they didn't use the coal from Portsmouth. They brought it in from elsewhere to refuel. So this is a structure that no longer exists. Now there's just a cove and a marina and one of those rail, those places where you can pump the rails yourself as you go up further north. But so we're talking about a coal mine, we're talking about a copper mine, we're talking about a coaling station, all right along the coast. Is things that you can think about. I wouldn't want to model this, and I have no intention of doing that, but it's fascinating to see. So as we move north again some more, we're still staying right on the coast, We go past the copper, the coaling station. I'm sorry, this is the coaling station in Millville. You can see it was a huge facility that was used to, I assume, to refuel the battleships and everything else that was using coal power at the time. To Bristol Ferry, and notice that this station is again very similar to the one that was in Middletown. They are interesting, different designs for passenger stations, and a great thing to. This is just a scratch building project that I'm trying to get to focus the time to get done, because I think it would just be a wonderful addition to this area. So this is Bristol Ferry. It's called Bristol Ferry because it was a ferry from there over to Bristol, Rhode Island, that was replaced by a bridge in 1928, 1930. And that was the first bridge that actually allowed people to get off the island without using a boat, without using a ferry. Quinnipiac Island was relatively isolated. It was, in fact, it wasn't until I was in college that they opened up a bridge from Newport over to the west to be able to get to Connecticut and so forth without taking a ferry. Most of my high school years were spent taking a ferry across the bay because there was no bridge. So the first bridge was in 1928, was the Mount Hope Bridge. It was at Bristol Ferry, and it went to Bristol. So, but this station is again part of that. Then the railroad continues north, crossing over. So there's this nice little brook, a nice little bridge, and something, a nice little place to model with some boats and so forth. To the Sakonnet River. Now, the Sakonnet River is a great river because it's not a river. It's actually a tidal strait, but we call it the Sakonnet River. It has no source. It's tidal. It's entirely salt water. It simply separates Quinnipiac Island from the mainland on one side. And there were two bridges that went across. Now, there's a modern one that you can see to the north. There was a railroad bridge at that location that's since been removed. Down below, you can see two spits of land coming close to each other, and that was the old stone bridge. So there were two bridges in relatively close proximity, again, something that I'm looking at modeling. But that lower bridge was for passenger cars and trolleys. So you had a railroad bridge, and then you had a trolley bridge to the south of it. That's the trolley bridge. Great little piece of engineering. And again, another really distinctive location for any kind of a layout. This is the railroad bridge. It used to move. It stopped moving during, I think it was the hurricane in 1960, if I'm not mistaken. It was pretty much stuck in place after that. And that pretty much ended must have been sometime after 1960, actually, because there were rail cars that did go in the 60s as far south as Newport. But after the bridge sort of ceased to function, the rail line on Quinnipiac Island was cut off from the mainland. It ceased operations. It became a tourist railroad. It was abandoned, and it became a tourist railroad. But this was the vital link that got it to Fall River. Fall River is just north of here. So we're going to sort of end up this tour by looking a little bit at Fall River, because there were some interesting things that went down there as well. Tiverton is where you head toward Fall River. You can see the bridge on the left. You got a fishing village. You've got a lot of little fishing villages along the way here, and you've got some of your normal quaint buildings that existed at the time near that. Of course, I model the thesis of my modeling is September of 1938, pre-hurricane. And the reason it's pre-hurricane is because a lot of the really interesting stuff was wiped away in the hurricane of 38. It did, however, give you the option of not having to actually finish any kits you have, because you can just sort of throw all the pieces around and say, look, there you go. You don't have to actually finish it, because the hurricane pretty much demolished everything that was a wooden structure along the coast down from Newport straight up the rest of the bay. So it was a big disaster in 38. It really changed the landscape, and a lot of really interesting things disappeared at that time. So we get to Fall River, and this is the Fall River Railroad Station. It was a stone station. It had great structural components to it. I've never seen a model quite like this, but there it is. That's the Fall River terminus. And Fall River was interesting because it had a huge number, as anyone who's familiar with Fall River knows, huge number of mills. But those mills weren't really connected to the railroad. They carted all their goods, and most of them were uh, various types of, clothing, linen, various materials that were made in the mills and then carted to the railroad stations. But there was a terminus for the railroad there in Fall River. And the American Printing Company was kind of the focus, and that's printing as in printing fabrics, not printing as in printing books. Was a major industry in Fall River, and as you can see, if you look at this picture, it's great. I mean, there's a sailing ship, there are pleasure crafts. There's also on the lower left, you can see the Fall River Line steamships and the Fall River terminus of the old Colony Newport Railroad. That some of those rail lines still exist today, although the American Printing Company is long gone. This is the current Conrail facility there. The building, the structure on your left, the what looks like a rail car is in fact a rail car that was the former home of the old Newport and Fall River, Old Colony and Fall River Railroad Museum, since closed because this area got massively redeveloped. But the trackage is still there. And this is an aerial view showing bridge across from Fall River over to other parts of Massachusetts. You can see the rail line, again, the terminus, interesting terminus there. And because of the naval and the naval heritage, that's Battleship Cove. So you've got the Battleship Massachusetts, you've got the Joseph Kennedy destroyer, you've got various other naval facilities, and that's where the old Colony Railroad Museum was. And you can see there's still some facilities there that are used in Fall River rail lines. And what was the printing company is now the Borden and Remington, and they make commodity chemical manufacturing. Which, if you look back and you look at the cars, you can see it's a chemical company that now has taken over the site of the old printing company. So that takes you from Newport to Fall River. Today, the track looks miserable. That's what it is. That's what's left of it. My sources, Peter Martin, a friend of mine who worked on the old colony for many years, has done a terrific summary of it. That summary is available online. Edward Ozog, if you've never heard of him, did a massive amount of photography collection and has collections, I think, at the Yukon and at the Providence Public Library, and a lot of his work is online as well. And he has a number of different websites that you can, if you just do a simple search on his name, Edward Ozog, you're going to find these sites with a massive number of photographs about Rhode Island railroading. So that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and I think I'm right on time.
Yes, you are, Steve, and what a good clinic that was. We do have a couple questions that have popped
Sure.
through, and are you ready for some?
I am.
All right. Well, the first question is, you've shown us a lot of historical photos, but nothing of a layout. So where are you in a layout?
I currently I moved into this place I'm in a couple of years ago, and I am currently in the process of finishing off the basement. I am building this layout modular style, so I'm using those design elements. So I have about 7 or 8 different modules that are currently under construction on the HO side that reflect some of this. I do a lot of structure building. I keep getting diverted by other things. You know how it is. But I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Maybe in a year or two, I can show you a layout tour of the old colony. But I think it's probably about 2 years off right now is my thinking.
Oh, wow. So as you're sitting there thinking about your layout, what are you going to build for your layout? There's so many unique features on the layout. You know, the 8-pane windmills, for example, the wrong way turntable for another, and a coal mine, you know, on an island. That's feet from the ocean. So
Right.
how are you gonna figure out what you want to model there, include?
Well, I'm lucky that I have a pretty large basement. So when we bought this place, obviously buying the first thing, my real estate agent is an old buddy of mine from high school, said, I know the first thing you want to look at is a basement. So we bought this. This is one of these retirement condos. It's 1,800 square feet. It's got an 1,800 square foot unfinished basement with a staircase in the middle.
That's nice.
And all the utilities in one corner. I said, okay, fine, that's great. Let's buy this place. But so I'm going to have room for an island, and so the center island of the layout is going to be Newport. So I'm currently building the structures in the Newport area, the older wooden buildings, some of the meat packing facilities, that sort of thing. And then we're going to have it curve around at the sides. And on one side, I'm going to have basically the mills of Fall River. And on the other side, I'm going to, I'm not being totally prototypical because I'm going the other direction and hopefully have a coal mine and maybe a windmill in the background, just to throw people off. Why do you have a windmill? But you're going to admit those are unusual design.
They are unusual, and it really places where you're modeling. Plus,
That's
being
right.
an island, it also
That's
helps
right.
to place where you are on the layout.
What we say is you can never get lost here because sooner or later you hit water.
That's right. That's right. I've been there. I've been to Portsmouth. I've been to Newport. Yeah, so I've been up there several times. It's
Yeah.
a great place to be. There was a question that came up from one of the people online, and I don't recall in your presentation. Did the New Haven take over this line, and if so,
Yeah.
when did they do that?
They actually took it over fairly early because the New Haven bought everything south of Boston.
Okay.
So when the New Haven bought the whole Old Colony railroad that goes out to Cape Cod and all through this southeastern Massachusetts area, this was part of the acquisition of it, so it became New Haven territory.
Okay.
I title it what I'm building is the Old Colony Division because I think the OCD initials probably are accurate description of where I'm at.
I'm an anthracite mining modeler myself. I model northeastern Pennsylvania, where they did mine anthracite that they could use, and so it's impressive that they mined anthracite there for so long and they really couldn't use it.
Right.
What about that mining operation? Is there something different about it since it's so close to the ocean? Were the operations any differently than other mines throughout the country?
Strangely, not all that much different, except obviously it wasn't a shaft. It was an open entrance pit. So you were at ground level as you went into the mines, and they went down, and they weren't that far underneath ground, relatively
Wow.
speaking. The coal was pretty close to the surface there. And this is actually part of a strain of coal that went through Rhode Island. If you go over to the other side of the bay, if you go to the Cranston area, if you're familiar with Rhode Island, there was a coal mine in Cranston as well. That was a fairly interesting facility. So you don't really think of Rhode Island and coal mining, but it gives you a sense of what people were trying to do. They tried a lot of different ways to make money with the mine. Obviously, they had some resources because they built a pretty large facility there for mining the coal, but it never was really something that made a lot of money for the investors.
Okay. Well, I have one more question.
Sure.
The copper industry that
Yeah,
is there. Now, I'm familiar with the mining of copper in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Did they have a mining operation, or was it just smelting, or?
They tried to mine it and smelt it there. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. This area is mostly now. It's nowadays there's a lot of vineyards. This is now I'm just going to ramble for a second, but this area, the island that we live on here, is actually really good agricultural land. It's one of the last remaining significant agricultural areas in the state. It's now mostly vineyards, but for many years it was dairy farms. There were dairy farms. There were a lot of corn operations, a lot of different farms and agricultural uses in this area. So again, it gives you this kind of weird mixture, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well, Steve, I appreciate you being with us this evening. It was a great clinic, and I look forward to seeing the layout versus these old photos. I want to see some new photos of the layout when you get it
next
started.
time.
Next time. Well, thank you very much, Steve.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I know.
It is almost halftime for day 2 of NERx, which means it's time for a special presentation of this year's achievement program and contest award winners for both models and photography. First, a couple of introductions. The NER's Achievement Program Chairman is Bill Brown, MMR. Ken May is the Model Contest Chairman for the region, and Kaylee Zhang is our Photo Contest Chairwoman. And once again, we have Kaylee in the studio this evening, so please welcome the NER's Photo Contest Chair, Kaylee Zhang.
Thank you, Chuck. Good to see you. Good to see everyone. Hope everyone's having a great time. And I hope we're having a wonderful plethora of clinics to share and good stuff to learn and take away, and hopefully all inspiring. And then who knows, maybe we can get some new entries for next year's contest, right?
Yep, I hope so.
Okay, so let's get started with tonight's contest. Let me bring up the slide deck. Let me start sharing. Oops. Let me start sharing. That would be important, right? Don't you love technology? It's always helpful, but it's always a pain in the butt. All right, here we go. So tonight, for the contest of model contest as well as the photo contest, we're going to be touching the rolling stock and prototype black and white photos. So we're going to change things up a little bit. Last night we started with the model. Tonight we're going to start with the photo contest in the category of black and white prototype. So in second place, we have Finally Home by Lewis McIntyre, a beautiful sepia composition of steam coming into an engine shed after her run. Unfortunately, we didn't get a photo from Lewis as well, so we're going to have to put him onto the milk carton again as well. But steam engines are a wonderful thing, right, Chuck? They're so lively and spiritedly. What would you say is your favorite part about a steam locomotive?
Well, it's all the motion on the steam locomotive, whether it's a geared locomotive or a rod-sided locomotive, just seeing all the motion on it, because you don't see that in a diesel engine. It's all hidden inside the shell or inside that hood.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all exposed on a steam locomotive, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with you. Well, it's funny because all of our entries for the black and white category have all been steam, and then our first place photo is actually yours. And it's kind of funny that that you mentioned about the side rods and the motion. Your photo titled "Letting Off Steam" exemplifies all of that, all those motions, all those linkages, and that animation that comes with the steam locomotives.
Yeah.
So
I like that shot.
Yeah, it's a beautiful shot, and also too, I love the texture that you kind of bring out in this photo. So well done, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
And then congratulations to Lewis as well.
That's right.
So, all right. Next off, we're going to kick off into the model contest in the category of rolling stock. Now, the winner for this one actually made my life very easy. So easy, in fact, that I was able to put this presentation together in the previous 5 minutes. Nothing like putting it to the last second, right? It's half the fun.
That's it.
So, without further ado, the winner for the model contest in both the first, second, and third place with a Wyoming Valley idler car, a Lehigh Valley ice service box car, and a Lehigh Valley wrong way box car is none other Mr. Overachiever himself, Chuck Diljak.
Well, thanks you, Kaylee. They're all part of my efforts in the achievement program.
Well, I think you're well on your way to accomplishing that goal. So, and they're beautifully done too. So, folks, if you're just watching this presentation, I highly encourage you to go to the Mill City 2020 website, millcity2020.org, and go scroll down to the mid page. You'll see the link to the actual contest photos. Definitely go into the virtual contest room and check out these photos, because there's a lot more detailed shots and that I just obviously couldn't fit into this one presentation. And you can see some of the prototype photos as well as the other sides of the box of these freight cars and other entries as well. So I want to highlight that it's not just the winners, it's everybody's entry. So I highly encourage everyone going over there to check that out. So to wrap it up, once again, congratulations to Lewis McIntyre and Chuck Diljic. Chuck, you actually have a very special award that I just kind of made up tonight, and you're the first honorary recipient of this fictitious award, and I'm calling it the Mal Hawk Award.
Yeah.
for winning the photo and the model contest. So congratulations for doing that, and also receiving being the first honorary recipient of the Mal Hawk Award.
Oh wow, thank you. And I'm wearing my bow tie too, as Malcolm
Exactly.
always wears too. So that's very cool. Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, my pleasure. Congratulations. No, in all sincerity, you did a fantastic job. So, Dave Ramos, if you're out in the crowd watching this, you should have contacted Chuck, not me, to build your chicken car. Just saying.
Well, thank you, Kaylee.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be back again with us for the last 2 evenings as well, presenting a few other entries for the photos as well as the models for winners in various categories. And thank you very much, Kaylee.
Yep, my pleasure. Thank you again. And again, I just want to remind folks to go visit millcity2020.org for the virtual contest room to see the winner, more up close detailed photos of the winners. Submission, as well as submissions of other folks who entered the contest.
Yeah, there's a lot of great models out there, and it'll give you a chance to also bone up on what we haven't seen so far for that will be the next 2 nights. For example, structures and displays, and some of the model photos. So we've got quite a few couple categories still to go through for the rest of the week.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, well, let's move on to the achievement program. So now most of you will know that the achievement program is the NMRA's path for a modeler to demonstrate skills in various aspects of the hobby, including model building, structures, rolling stock and motive power, scenery, track and electrical work, and service to the hobby itself. This year's AP certificate recipients have met the requirements of the program in one or more of these hobby facets and have earned some recognition of their peers for their accomplishments. The NER's Achievement Program Chairman, Bill Brown, has put together a list of these achievement recipients for our review and congratulations. So now let's roll the Achievement Program video. Bill. We start the second half of this evening's activities with a short clinic on using paper to build the model for your railroad. Our clinician has been a railroad fan for his whole life and received his first American Flyer train at the age of 3. He moved on to HO scale and joined the NMRA as a life member in his 20s. He joined a club in Tucson, Arizona, and became active in the Arizona division of the NMRA. He moved to New York State and has been active in clubs in the Rochester area and in the Lake Shores division. Now that he is retired, he's been able to work on the NMRA Achievement Program certificates, having earned CARS, structures, and volunteer certificates. His interest in using paper and modeling came about as a result of not being able to find a proper asphalt roof option for modeling houses for his railroad. He had a couple of old models and kits that his father had used that were paper and realized that there was quite a history of using paper in the hobby. This video clinic will briefly talk about the history, the current state of this modeling option, and show a simple building being constructed. While we don't have Jim in the control room with us, let's still welcome Jim Fairbanks and on his video.
Hello, my name is Jim Fairbanks. Today I want to talk a little about a subject that hasn't gotten much press in the last few decades, and that is paper. Specifically, using paper as a material in our modeling. But first, a short history. Paper was first used in 1936 when Gordon Varney began manufacturing his HO kits. The boxcars and reefers had paper sides, which were photographically reproduced from pictures he took in the Los Angeles railroad yards. These early freight car sides were pre-printed and sold with the slogan, "No paint needed." I'm not certain that the cars displayed here are Varney models, but they do have paper on all sides like the early Varney cars did. Other companies soon came out with paper-sided products in a variety of model kits. The Virginian Railroad battleship gondola is unique with cardstock sides and has been rarely modeled. The Dale Newton Company came out with the Red Ball line of kits. This particular kit is labeled HON3 and is about the right size for an HON3 car, but the Santa Fe logo suggests otherwise. Building kits soon followed suit, like this ideal HO gauge railway system kit from 1939, called the Gay Crossing and Shanty. During World War II, modelers continued to use paper in more and more inventive ways. For example, the turntable and truss bridge that used heavy manila folder material to represent steel plate and I-beams. After World War II, we started getting all types of materials to work with, along with the funds to purchase them. Paper models all but disappeared. In the 1970s, the NMRA was producing its bulletin magazine, and someone had the bright idea to provide pre-printed car sides in multiple scales. I see this as kind of the first salvo in the resurgence in an interest in using paper. Since then, there has been a growing development within the hobby of paper options as a building material. Why use paper when there are so many other materials available? The advantages are cost and speed of construction. In the past, the focus of building with paper has been on car sides. I have found a greater use when constructing buildings for my model railroad. Here are some ideas and sources of plans and information. Paper can be a key element in the construction of even a Merit Award-winning model, like this barn and pair of sidles. Paper is very good for using on those background scenes and backdrops. Also, a paper model is very good as a temporary placeholder model for that special kit that you're going to build someday. Another use is to model what I call space takers that present the concept of what you're trying to do. You can accomplish a lot in a short amount of time and at very little cost, and take that plywood Central Railroad to the next level of completeness. Have a deadline and not a lot of money to spend on a project? Try paper models. All the buildings on this T-track module were constructed of paper and cardboard. And if you need a model in a size other than the one you normally use, either in another scale or for that forced perspective model, it's easy to adjust the printer setting to print out the plans in another size. Here, the same building in N and HO scale. Let's take a closer look. The dairy barn and silos were originally intended to be only a placeholder model. As I worked on it, it evolved into a contest quality model, but the bones of a paper model are still here. The plans came from a railroad model craftsman article that was laid out in the magazine. Cardboard was used to build the substructure, and a paper wrap was used on the silos. Campbell paper shingles cover the roof. The published scale drawings from the model magazines are usually to N or HO scale, but if it's not your preferred scale, scan it into your computer and print it to another size. Compute the % difference to set your printer or copier to make that transition. The publishers usually state that you can make copies for your own use. Backdrop building pictures are readily available. Rather than attaching those pictures directly onto your backdrop, mount them on foam core. These paper backdrop pictures came from Walthers. I like to use foam core as it tends to be dimensionally stable if kept dry, especially for small pieces. I use black foam core for backdrop buildings as it gives a better appearance on the sides and roofline. Laminate a plan or picture onto it and position right in front of your backdrop for that three-dimensional look. Also, when it comes time to revise that backdrop scene, you won't lose the investment in those pictures. Want a temporary stand-in or placeholder model for a kit? Copy the kit plans or instructions that you have purchased. Many kits have full side views of the building. If there isn't a side view in the plans, but you have plastic or other parts, lay the parts on your scanner, scan them into your computer, and print paper sides. Build up that stand-in while you await the time to complete the model. That stand-in model will build quickly and help you determine where you want that final masterpiece to go. Remember, you have to purchase that kit. You may not sell these copies, and you shouldn't pass your plans out among your friends. When using foam core, window openings can be carved out and replaced with castings to give a more three-dimensional look. When you replace that placeholder, you can reuse the castings that you put on your paper model. I drew the plan for this model based on an article in a magazine. The magazine's plan didn't have all the detail on the plan to create a full wall and would have required too much guesswork. I chose instead to draw my own version of this building with the intent of producing multiple copies of it in paper. I built up 7 houses, but only detailed one side of each, intending to place them on the layout in such a way that only the detailed sides would be seen. The house on the left is detailed on the other side. Expanding on the idea of drawing your own plans, I wanted a concrete columned building like you see for factories, cold storage plants, and ice houses. I photographed a building of the type I was looking for. Then I got on my computer and input the picture file into a drawing program. Even simple and free drawing programs can be used for this. I expanded the pictures and created what were passable elements to create a factory wall. I printed copies of the wall elements and put them together to build a brewery out of paper. I added a bunch of detail and installed it on my layout. The brick wall came from another picture and was built up to form a plausible brick element as well. By the way, the columns were laminated onto cardboard for a three-dimensional look. The Otter Creek Brewing sign from my brewery is cut out from a cardboard drink coaster and built up on a wooden frame, another use of paper in modeling. Actually, I started my venture into using paper by wanting a roof covering that better represented asphalt shingles. So I got on my computer paint program and drew rectangles in a roof pattern. I took a copy of roof photographs and copy and pasted the various colors from the photos randomly into my rectangles. This created a plausible shingle roof. The barn also has this roof along with siding representing board and battens that were also created on my paint program. If you are talented, you may choose to draw your plan right on the foam core poster board sides yourself. Master model railroader Paul Chandler, a professional architect in Tucson, drew his plans directly onto the foam core and has used these placeholder models for many locations on his layout very effectively. Note that he omits the roof, and yes, he is replacing them over time. I spoke about how fast you can build with paper. The 10 buildings on this T-Track module were constructed of paper and cardboard in about 50 hours over a 4-week period. The buildings in road are cardstock, and none were available to me when I started. In fact, I'm an HO scale modeler and had never built an N scale model up to this point. The cost outlay was zero for the buildings. Several of the buildings came from the internet. The point of this is to show how quickly you can do this when you need to. The internet has several sites with models you can download for a price, but many of these sites also have a free building you can download to get a taste of their products. If you have a color printer, I encourage you to sample these and see for yourself. These models come with everything you need to create a complete model along with detailed instructions on how to build it. These models make great background fillers and with a little work can work as foreground models as well. You will need a credit card to buy these. Once purchased, the website downloads all the instructions and building parts in PDF format to your computer. Then you print as many copies as you want in any scale you need, and you're ready to go. The model suppliers are jumping on board with the options of their own as well, particularly in the way of supplies to use with other building projects. Micromark and Walthers have backdrops and supplies. Campbell paper shingles were a staple product for years and may yet be available. Other companies like Paper Creek have come and gone, but you might be able to find supplies of their products at trade shows as well. Let's talk more about the materials and tools. You will need a supply of cardstock, poster board, gator board, and/or foam core. You'll want cardboard of varying thicknesses. The thinnest poster board, followed in thicknesses by cereal cartons, shirt backing boards, or store shirt boxes, up to the cardboard used to back pads of paper. Note that none of this is corrugated. Foam core comes in a variety of colors. For backdrops, I recommend you get black, as it works well to disguise the edges of your paper building. For adhesives, I prefer Scotch brand double-sided tape to attach the printed paper pieces to cardboard. I have tried other tapes and glues without too much success. Also, you will want wood glue to attach cardboard and foam pieces together. I find white glue to be too watery for this application. I know that there are other adhesives such as spray adhesive, rubber cement, or other non-watery glues. I have settled on tape and wood glue as my go-to because I haven't been real impressed with the application or longevity of some of the other products or how they interact with the paper pieces of my models. As to tools, no surprises here. An X-Acto knife or any other hobby knife with a supply of number 11 blades or razor blades, scissors, a metal straight edge, a square, and weights of some form help laminate paper to cardboard without bubbles and hold buildings together while glue dries. Add to these a sharp pencil, tweezers, toothpicks, and paintbrushes. And lastly, you may want a supply of colored markers or hobby paints. I have used acrylics on my paper models, making certain not to get the paper too wet. Now let's put together a foam core building. Print the plans, documentation, and instructions if any. This time, I'm going to make another of the house model, but I'm going to modify the design a bit. Cut out the walls of your house from the copy that you printed. Next, add a layer of double-sided tape to the foam core material you have chosen and add your cutout pieces. After adding the paper cutouts to my foam core, I cut my working area from the large sheet, as it is easier to cut out my pieces from a smaller piece of material. Cut out each piece you're going to work with. Draw your knife away from inside corners for a cleaner cut. Once you have all your wall pieces, you can begin to see how it all goes together and may want to test how pieces are going to be assembled. When using foam core, allow for the thickness of the material so that your corners are even on the outside and the foam doesn't show. You will need to mark and dig out the corners on some of your walls. Note the walls where I selected to dig out the corners were the side walls. I also had to dig out grooves where the interior walls meet the sides. The end walls and interior walls were left intact. When assembling, you will want a square to lay next to one corner. Place an amount of wood glue in each of the grooves that you cut. Assemble the walls and apply weights to hold them together until the glue dries. In the case of this model, the roof will need additional support. Note the cereal box cardboard inserts applied to the inside walls. Next, measure and cut cardboard to apply to the model as a subroof. If I'm going to add another layer of paper shingles, I add double-sided tape before I glue the subroof on. Weights are used to assure a solid fit. The finished roof is going to have a layer of shingles. This shingle paper is the one that I talked about making earlier. Once the shingles are applied, you have the option of adding additional details like window and door castings, a front and rear porch, or steps up to the doors. Using colored markers or thinned paint also goes a long way to making this filler model something you may want to keep in place on your model railroad. I would encourage all of you to experiment with the use of paper in your
As a former paper structure builder in my teen years, it is interesting to see how paper modeling has grown in recent years. Thank you, Jim. Okay, now our first layout tour in the second half is a pre-recorded interview and video tour of the layout with its builders. The layout is the Main and Western and is set in the autumn of New England. It also features the narrow gauge Portage Oneida Railway. Let's welcome Gordon and Gene Spalte with John Doring as the interviewer.
So welcome everyone. This is the Layout host. I'm John Doring, and the guests here this evening are Gordon and Gene Spalte. How are you guys tonight?
We're doing very good. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Well, I'm excited to see some of the pictures you've shared of your layout. Tell us a little bit about your train background and your train story. How did you get into this?
Well, I'm one of those guys that got a line out when I was a kid, and I had a little 4x8. Then I went to HO when I was in my early teens and did some scratch building, some MR, and from the MR magazine, they had like the dollar cars they used to have in the magazine. Yeah. I built a couple of those. And that kind of went on the wayside. I got interested in girls and schools and sports, and then I did a stint in the Army. And when we came out, we had my son and my daughter, and I thought, well, geez, it'd be kind of nice to have a little train underneath the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And my wife didn't even know I was interested in trains whatsoever. So we put the little end scale under the Christmas tree, and I thought, oh, geez, I kind of missed this stuff. And so I got kind of bitten by the bug again and jumped right into it. And I was in a group from a guy's basement, and we used to meet. We were called the Iron Horse, Farron Qualologist, whatever.
Yeah, right.
Fancy dancy stuff. But I was in there for a couple of years. And I was around 71, 72. When I got out of the service. And so I was in there for quite a few years, so I didn't have any layout. And then they moved to another place, and then we kind of like, his wife wanted to spice back, and so that was kind of like, okay, that's the end of that. And I didn't do anything for a while, and they started building something at home. I had a little switching layout in the basement, and we were there they had first home for 17 years. And we left there and went into our present home, which is a nice ranch with a walk up. And I wanted the basement. My wife wanted the modern kitchen. So we both got what we wanted. And I started a layout. And I made one of those layouts that fit the whole basement, except for the washer, dryer. And they got to be too big. I had some serious design flaws. And I took it all down and started all over again. And you see now what I've ended up with. This is my second layout.
Wow. Wow. And when did you start this one?
Oh, this is about making, we moved here in 90 and we were 40. So this is probably about 15, 17 years in the making for this layout.
HO scale and.
Yes, HO scale for the Main and Western, which is standard gauge.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the Portland Oneida, which is narrow gauge. And this is based on the Bridgeton and Saco River 2-footers I found out that while researching the Crawford nuts, which you actually see part of it here, I found out that the 2-footer is actually connected with the main central in Bridgeton Junction, which is just below Hiram, Maine. And so it's like, oh, okay, so I can connect my 2-footers to my standard gauge and still be, I'll say whatever, legal, whatever we want to say.
Right.
Correct.
Right. So you live in Rochester, New York. Why model railroads in Maine? What's the connection there?
I love of it. Yeah, we love New England.
Yeah.
When our kids were little, we used to go camping up in Maine all the time. And we would Half Moon Pond up in Lake Bombazine, spent a lot of time up there. Drove up to Crawford Notch a couple of times.
Beautiful country.
And we just fell in love with it. And I love the fall season.
Sure.
And one of the things I like about it is it's small railroads, and nothing really, really big.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of got us interested in that. And then we took the Conway Scenic Ride, and then it was like, that's perfect, beautiful.
Well, let's take a look at some of your pictures here, should we?
Okay. Now, I mentioned this is a basement layout, and you see the stairs to the left there. And right next to the stairs is what I call Walden Pond, named after Henry David Thoreau. I like to read.
Yeah.
And behind that is the Bronson Paper Mill. And in the very back there is what I call Rygate. Now we move over to the right side up there is coming up through the Zeeland Valley and Zeeland Falls. On the top is Quebec Junction. Coming more towards the front, we come up to the Crawford Notch, and there's a Mount Willard section house up on the hill there, like on the mountain.
Okay.
Below that is the 2-footer where it comes into the main central, and that is Portage Junction, patterned after Bridgeton Junction. Now the layout is correct. The buildings are a little compressed, but it's pretty much what it was.
Wow. Well, I mean, the first sense I got looking at these is the layout looks very, very finished. Would you say it's pretty much done as much as these things are?
It's 100% as far as the trackage. I'm still working on it. I have to say my wife did all the skirting on there. Wonderful job. And she did most of those trees up in Crawford there where you see where the Mount Willard section house.
Yeah.
She did most of those trees. So this is not my layout entirely. We work on this together.
Okay. Excellent. Let's go to the next one here. So this must be looking the other way, huh?
Yeah, turn around the other way. And on the left there is what is part of Crawford Notch. And going around is what's called the girders. And you can see all the Crawford Valley going down through there, going through there. You can see Mount Willard's Bridge, the section house. And in the front is what I call it in the valley. And that is Windsor Minerals. And way in the back there, if you can see way in the back towards the window and stuff, that's the little Portage Oneida narrow gauge.
Okay. Some of these things we'll see up closer here in a minute, huh? All right. This says Fiddle Yard.
All right, now this is a fiddle yard. We've gone to the back behind what was Lee Rygate.
Yeah.
And this started out, I was going to have a point-to-point layout, no run-through. A little design error on my part didn't work out so well. So I was going to have just 2-track staging yards each way, stacked one above the other. And like I say, a design flaw. So I said, well, I'm going to make a fiddle yard out of that. But I did want to run through. And so I did that. And it's worked out very, very well. I will say sometimes I do miss not having staging because you get kind of busy there switching trains in and out, and there's a lot of handling of the cars. But in the end, that can run an obsession forever and ever and ever because the cars always get switched out.
Right, right. So for for viewers, then the big part of the railroad sort of on the other side of the skyboard here, right?
Yes, this is the side. When I originally started, this was going to be just bare plywood and homosoap.
Yeah.
And some of the guys were over and said, well, geez, you got to have guys back there making the trains up, give them something to do. I said, okay. And I put in the freight house on the right-hand side there. I went to the building in the left-hand side there. And you can see the trees in the background. That tree cut through the background going to the other side. And on the right side behind the freight house, there's a tunnel that goes through to the other side going the opposite direction.
Oh, I see. Okay. So got it. Okay. And you've given us a track plan here, so that fiddle yard is over on the left side of the diagram.
Yes, where it says St. Almond and Fiddleberg, that is actually where the fiddle yard is. And this is nothing more than what I call a convoluted, twisted loop folded over on itself.
Yeah. And how big is the whole area?
13 by 35,
okay.
Which is actually half my basement. And you can see on the right-hand side that the Portage Oneida, they started as a little test group, or test area, I should say. Yeah. And I found out later, as I mentioned, that they're connected with the main central going up through Crawford Notch to Bridgeton Junction. So I thought, well, jeepers, I could actually make this part of my layout.
There you go.
And so it's kind of like taking a life on its own, and that's where it is now.
That's very nice. So the layout you had before this was bigger, and so you decided to make it a bit smaller.
Yes, the layout before took up, like I say, 3/4 of the basement, and I was going with the all the things you're supposed to do when you're doing it in those days, 30-degree curves, 30 radius curves.
Yeah.
And I was handling all my track, building all my turnouts. And it looked really kind of nice. I had a couple of finished scenes, looked pretty nice, but I could see I was never going to get done in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I had some serious design flaws in it, and the aisles were way too narrow, and it was truly a point to point, and it just was not working. So I took it all down and rebuilt this one.
Got to have courage sometimes, but
well, it's like you either do it or you don't. And I wanted to have a layout I could enjoy and at least get done, or mostly done on my lifetime.
Yeah. Well, it just looks beautiful. Let's look at some more of the pictures here. So when I saw this, I thought, oh, you must be an operator. You're well organized here, huh?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about operations.
Yes, I am. I love my wife and I. We love operations. And I got the idea for a storyboard from Jim Height from the Syracuse guys.
Yeah.
And he had one of these on his layout, and I thought, well, it looks pretty good. So people can come back and they can look at the storyboard, and they get to see on the upper left a map of what the area looked like. And I have some little rules and stuff that makes it, palatable. On the right-hand side, I show how my layout connects with the Ogdensburg and Portland, Maine. And going down a little bit, it explains my Maine and Western, my Portage Oneida. And I had some pictures on the bottom there so you get the idea of the narrow gauge and the standard gauge. And I have a schedule of my trains. I have a timetable. Underneath there, I have my clipboards, and that's what the crews get. And I go over to the right-hand side there. I'm using JMI operations. Okay. I color-coded the trains I have. Makes the crews easy to see, figure out who's got what, and works out very nice.
What era are you modeling here?
Transition era, and it's kind of like a rubber time, 47 to 57. Mm-hmm. I picked 47 because in 1948, the St. Johnsbury and Lake Champlain, which is one of the railroads that emulate, which goes from St. Johnsbury, well, it's supposed to go to Ogdensburg, but CV changed that out. But they dieselized by 1948 with the 70 tonners. So I wanted to be able to still have some steam. So I picked 47. And some of the railroads actually ran steam, especially Canadian National up until mid 50s, 56, 57. Yeah. So that was kind of like my cutoff point.
Okay. Yeah, that's my favorite era as well. All right, let's tell us a little bit about some of the specific areas here.
Okay, now I mentioned before when we looked at what was in the fiddle yard, I mentioned those trees in the background.
Yeah.
And that train was headed up, they would be going eastbound. And now this is the way it looks like on the other side.
Okay.
So you actually change directions. And I should mention on this railroad, east and west are not always going, left and right. Because it's like you're standing on one side of the track, look at the train going one way. You step on the other side of this track, turn around, it's still going the same way, but it looks different.
Yeah.
So this is what the first thing you see is the train actually enters a major portion of the layout.
Okay.
This is Rygate. I should mention all the names on here except for Fiddleberg and St. Almond are actually from the area. This started out as going to be part of like St. Johnsbury, ended up being entirely fictitious. So it had nothing to do with anything, but I wanted something simple. Looking at all the track plans up in the area, nothing was very completely confusing. No complex track work or whatever.
Yeah.
So that kept everything pretty simple. Now this station, I wanted a brick station, and I didn't know quite what I was going to do with it. So I saw the Walders had the pellet station. It had some clean lines, looked nice, and I liked the stained glass or the transom. So I used that. I took the cupola off, so I couldn't stand that, and I painted it up kind of plain so it looked nice. Let's see.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. And what the funny thing is, all this important stuff I look for the station for, it's on the other side. You can't see it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful scene. And when I looked through these, I thought, this is what we'll miss, because if I was actually in your basement, I'd probably linger over a few of these and really look at some of the details.
Now, the little platform there in the center, that was for a team track, which I was going to put in there, but it was going to just be for switching baggage cars in and out. And I didn't like that, so I made a regular team track out of it. Now, this is number 75, which is my passenger, this is my milk train. This never changes, and 74 is the alternative for it.
Yeah.
And in the background there is number 748, and they're switching out the Adirondack Fuel Company, which is on the right-hand side up in there.
Nice.
That was originally going to be, in the main scheme of things, that was going to be an engine house for the Bronson Mills paper mill. Well, after a while of operating, I thought, well, I'm not generating enough traffic here, so out went that idea, and I made that into the Adirondack Fuels. Now, the building next to it was going to be a national company, and no one knew what worked there because it was a secret facility by the government, so it was all government jobs there. So everybody asked me, well, what do they do there? And I said, well, I can't tell you because it's government jobs. It's all secret. So, okay. So they got kind of old, and then we eating crackers one day in our soup at the restaurant, and they happened to look at the package, the oyster crackers, and it was Westminster Bakery Company, and they were out in Rutland, very similar to this building. And I thought, well, okay, I'll just change it out. So now instead of having an engine terminal with no switching, I have now Adirondack Fuels, and I have the Westminster Baker Company.
Okay, cool. Really nice.
And I'll say, okay, this is Bronson Mills, named after my grandfather. This is patterned after a mill from the turn of the century, and I'll say the prior century. This is from the early, late 1890s to 1900s. So it's not a huge mill complex. They did do some pulping in there. They did get some pulp from other places. This is like what we call a specialty mill. And now my having worked at Kodak in the paper area, this is what a specialty mill does. They might make some of their own pulp, but they buy a lot of pulp too. So it's
certainly a lot of those smaller mills all over New England.
Oh yeah, this is that's why I wanted a smaller one.
Yeah,
and this has worked out great. I will say the top of the Bronson Mills there, that comes off. That's a pop-up that was initially designed into the layout because I knew I was not going to be able to reach all the track to clean and everything else. And I just kind of expanded off to the right there.
Nice.
The powerhouse was a Kiwi maybe is one of their powerhouses. And I didn't quite like it. It was too European, so I made an addition. The company made an addition, upgraded all their boilers, so they put a new top on it. And that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, that looks nice. We'll keep going here. That's really nice.
Walden Pond. This is after the paper mill. This is coming around, going towards I showed you where the stairs were there. And I have my little beaver pond in there, building a little lodge. There are 3 beavers hidden in there, and that's all Envirotex. The station is one of those little tiny woodland scenic stations. I wanted a small station, which were a lot of the stations like that were up in Maine and New Hampshire, Vermont. I wanted to keep it small. Up to the left there's a hobo jungle. Got to have one of those. And for those buildings, I researched what a hobo jungle looked like. And in the Hoover years, they had quite a few of them. They had Hoover towns.
Yeah.
And I took some of those images from that and made these little Hoover houses up here on the hill for the hobos.
The
And
trees
I
look
made little
beautiful
falls
too.
in the background there. And if you look across, you can see way in the far back there, that is Quebec Junction, and that is all the mountains up and through there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the backdrops. They look really pretty.
Yeah, I did it all myself.
Really? Oh, hand painted, huh?
Yeah. I
Very
wasn't too sure about it, but I got some pictures and they showed the valley. And then one day we're coming out of Rutland up there, traveling around New England, and I go, boy, it looks just like I painted. So it worked out
Yeah.
very well.
Well, I kind of live in this area, and it certainly is evocative. It's particularly all the colorful trees. That's really feels
Well,
like
Jean
home to
helped
me.
me with a lot of those trees too. She's responsible for a lot of that stuff. Now we come around to the back and we went over behind Rygate. Now we come on the other side.
Mm.
This is Quebec Junction. On the bottom is part of the Zealand Valley. And on the top is Quebec Junction. You can see more of the backdrop. If you look carefully, you can see this white building way in the back. That is the Red Roof Lodge. And that is up in there. Some people call it Breton Woods, but that is actually up in there.
Oh yeah.
I took that from photographs and painted that in there.
Oh yeah,
And
I
I
see it.
blended it with the mountains.
That's quite a grand old hotel, huh?
Yes, it is. Now that building to the right there, that is a stand-in for a creamery. And one of these days I'm actually going to build the creamery, but you got to have something there. So
There you go. Okay.
this is more of Quebec Junction, and it's waiting for the speeder.
I see the little
This
speeder
is where
there.
the Grand Trunk, not too many people here that they think of Grand Trunk Western, but there was a Grand Trunk in the east. And this is the Grand Trunk crossing the Main and Western. In the background there is another set of buildings I painted. That was actually from a picture from a calendar from up in that area. And then this is going to have was going to be the Crawford's Depot. That might be something else, but that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. So this is what I call Quebec Junction.
Nice.
And if you look in the front there, that little black square on the fascia board,
Yeah.
it actually has all the train times on it for the regular trains coming through. So if the guys, when they're operating here, say, well, I got to get out of the way because the train's coming, and I have a fast clock mounted on the fascia up on the top there, and they can keep a track of what they got to clear for. So it's worked out really well. You guys can say, well, I didn't know the train was coming. I said, well, it's right in front of you.
Excellent. Oh, this is a nice scene.
Now, this is from the prototype. This is on Crawford Notch. This is actually coming up the end just before you get into what I call Quebec Junction, which is actually Crawford's. And they did have a gateway, which is a big stone rock on the left-hand side there. They had a highway that cut through there coming out towards the front of us here, but I decided to leave that out. I just didn't have a room for it, and I wanted to make it look more like people depend on the trains, not the highway.
Yeah.
The girders is from the prototype. If you get pictures of this, you can see that mount of the cliff outcropping in the back looks just like that. I took all those pictures and I made those piers for the girders exactly like they looked in there.
Yeah.
The only difference is this is on a curve, but I made it look like it's straight across, which it was in the prototype.
Mm. Mm-hmm. And what?
So if you look at pictures, this is pretty close to what it looks like there.
I can imagine it does look very realistic. And what kind of techniques did you use to build your scenery in these rock outcroppings?
Well, the rocks actually, what it is, it's on the foam core, and it's on the curve. So I was thinking, boy, if I get that track, then I'm not gonna be able to build all this stuff. So what I did is I took the foam core and I shaped the first layer to fit on the backdrop. I glued another layer in the front of it, and then another layer in front of that, and then I carved that all out so that would slip in behind the track there, which is what it does. And once it was all painted and detailed and everything else, I slipped it in behind the track and finished it all off.
Yeah.
Now I put in all the trees on the top along the ridge line up in there. And what I did with that, that was just like little, what do you call it? Gray dead. What it is lichen, and I didn't like that, so I took that all off. I used this polyfill.
Yeah.
I stretched it all out and glued that on there. And I took a whisk broom, painted gray, and I cut off the whisk, and I just pushed them in there. because if you look at these pictures up in this whole area there, you can see these are all like birch trees up into there. So they're all very light colored and they stick out very prominently. So I wanted to be able to bring that out. So that's why I stuck those in there, and it looks pretty close to what the pictures I've seen up there. So
very nice.
They worked out very well.
Yeah, that's a nice scene. Okay.
Okay, now we're coming from, you can see in the back is where the girders were. We're coming now where Gene made all those beautiful trees up into there. And we're coming down towards Willie Brook Bridge and the Mount Willard section house. I looked at a lot of pictures of this. I finally found a picture of the Willie Brook, put that in to be the same technique I used for doing the cliffs up by the girders. I built the bridge there. It is the piers. There is a pier. The bridge is actually separated exactly as in the pictures. I went into the Mount Willard section house, and I finally found some plans for that. Other than 3 feet short on the length and the width is exactly what it looked like up there. Now it changes over time, depending what time period you're looking at, but it's pretty accurate representation of what that building looks like.
Very nice.
And if you look in the back, way back on the left-hand side there, I'd say that you're down in the valley. That is what I call Windsor Minerals.
Okay. Yeah. The whole layout's on one level, right? But I can see there's some grade.
Well, I'll say where it started below Quebec Junction. It was going to be a double decker, and the way it worked out, I just didn't like it. So I said, "The heck with that idea," and it's essentially a single layout, or single level. Yes.
Okay.
Now this is what I call Livermore. As you're coming down the Crawford Notch, past the Mount Willard section now, if you go around the bend there, and I have what I call Livermore, and this was going to be a logging town. Well, this is like a crawl-in space in between there. You're behind the mountain, and I would crawl in there, and I thought, well, I could make a little operator station in here. I was going to have a logging section in there, and trains would run back and forth. And I was much younger then. And so crawling in there a couple of times, I thought, well, what am I thinking of? So they become a static scene. And I have some little leftover logging pieces in there. And that Livermore station, the very first building I ever made is a model railroader. And I think that was a Campbell scale kit, whatever. It's a wooden kit. And I did all the details on it. And I thought, well, geez, I kind of like that thing. And it was supposed to be a section house, but now I made it into a little depot. And if you look carefully, you can see the woman walking up between all the cows there. She's going to a home way back in the woods there. This is a very isolated area. The train is waiting to cool its brakes from coming down, descending through Crawford Notch. So it has to be 3 fast minutes before you can continue on to go to Quebec Junction.
Oh, nice. It's a really pretty scene. How much distance is there from the front of your camera to the backdrop right there?
You're probably about 20 inches, maybe.
Okay.
That's about it.
It's really
from the track to the backdrop. There's maybe 4 inches, 5 inches. That's it.
Yeah, it really blends in nice. Very nice.
Now we're in Portage Junction, and this is where the main central actually connected with Richmond and Saco River, but my main and western connects with Portage Oneida. And since the main central at that time owned 2/3 of the building, and BNSR owned 1/3 of the building, so it was painted in the main central colors of gray and green. I made this out of cardstock, and I laminated onto it. All these buildings come off. Every building on my layout comes off. So it's the canopies on the edge of the building are cut short, and they made them come off, so the valleys don't always look quite as nice as they could have been, but it works for me.
Why did you make them that way?
Because I wanted to be able to take everything apart, and if I had the passenger canopies all attached to the building, moving the building, I would end up breaking them off anyways. So I just left them so you can pull everything all apart, and if you want to clean track or whatever you got to do in there, everything comes off. If you burn on any lights on there, you can get in there and replace them.
Okay. Yeah, just general accessibility and stuff.
Yes. This is looking at the other end. This is the freight house is a typical Maine and Western freight house. I have pictures from several books of the Bridgeton Junction, and this is exactly what it looks like, except the passenger canopies were much longer and all, so I had to compress them a bit. But this is what it looked like, the same layout and everything else. So this is accurate as far as the freight house goes. I think it's pretty accurate as far as the depot goes, because they said the depot made after the Harrison Depot on the BNSR. So I copied that and fit it in there. So I assume that's close to what it was there. But you can see the difference in the size of the cars from the caboose and the other freight cars there compared to the little two-footer. And people come down there and ask me, "Oh, you got N scale here too?" And I said, "No, no, no. That is HO scale, but I'm using N scale mechanisms like the couplers and the trucks and stuff."
Right. It's really nice. Yes.
Windsor Minerals. There was a railroad model craftsman article maybe back in the 60s about the Gassets, Vermont talc mill. And that time was Eastern Magnesia Talc Company, also known as Windsor Minerals. And the talc they used was for roofing products. So I was going to build this, and I wasn't too sure how I was going to add a few pictures. And then Gene and I went to a ops meet up in Albany and visited RPI, and they have this talc mill on their layout. So I took pictures of that and used that to build this. Now this is the Walters Glacier Gravel, and I bought that kit just so I could get the conveyor, and it turns out I didn't use the conveyor whatsoever. So I used a silo, took the building all apart, cut them all up, made them fit in there. I did the same thing. That's a truck dump to the left there, and they had all this loose talc, which is a gray, whitish type of rock. I don't know why it was there. It was on the prototype, so I put it in. So the building itself is kit bashed, and the other buildings are all scratch built, and it looks nothing like the real Windsor Minerals look like, but it works.
It's a beautiful scene, and I can see the bridge back in the background. So we're coming back around here, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Look at this.
Now this is when we went. The very first, we went from the back to the yard out to Rygate. Now we're going the opposite direction.
Back in.
Now we're going from the fiddle yards out onto the layout from the western direction. And this is what I call Zealand Valley. Actually, it was a Zealand Valley, Zealand Falls. And I don't know if there's a Zealand Falls, but I'm calling it that anyway. I didn't want a rip-roaring fall. I wanted it more like in fall time when it's like just water kind of trickling down. Because everybody's got the roaring rivers, and I on there. So the train comes down. This is my number 75. This is my milk train coming through there. And the reason I have all the brush on the side, those are what they call pot toppers. And up in here, I've done it myself, so I'm glad I did this. People reaching in there to switch their cars and stuff. Any type of scenery get taken out. This is pretty robust, so it's lasted up there pretty well.
That's very pretty. Almost looks like a painting.
Yeah, it looks. I'm very happy with it.
That's a good scene. I like the smoke and the fog, kind of in the mist in the background.
Yep, and it looked, and that's why I mentioned we come out of Rutland there, and those mountains in the background. I wasn't too sure about them, but we come out of Rutland, I go, oh, geez, it looked just like I have at home.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's our last picture. I put in this information sheet here at the end so that people who watch this later on would be able to have some of the details.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing?
Please, G. Go ahead.
Everything that's on this layout has been his work. There hasn't been anybody else that has ever done anything other than Gordon. And I'm very proud of what he's done over the years. And it's become a dream for him and something that I'm very proud of, being his wife. And
I followed him along for a long time, and then this year I became an NMRA member myself.
Right.
So, yeah,
That's
so,
wonderful. That's
yep.
wonderful. When he first when I first started corresponding with Gordon, and he said that that you both had worked on the layout, I have to admit, the first thing that went through my mind is, and you're still married?
50, going on 54 years, yeah.
Wow, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
You know, it's a
Well,
beautiful layout.
back in January, we went to a friend's in Syracuse and ran his layout. And we go to ops weekends in Syracuse, which I love. And I'm one of the only women, okay? And I came home after an ops day with this man. And I wrote an article to the NMRA magazine, Women in Railroading, and she published it.
Oh, yes. Oh,
yes.
That's
so, but
that's
I mean, it's something that we really enjoy together. And it's just too bad. There's got to be a lot more women that could be interested in it. And it's a wonderful thing. It really is.
Well, I think you've built something really, really nice. And I hope that at some point before too long, some of us will get a chance to actually to see it in person.
I know, in meet. I know. This is very difficult, but let's hope.
Yes.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, we'll get there. Well, thank you very much for opening up your basement so that we could all kind of take a quick peek in and see what you have. And we'll look forward to talking to you a little later.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed doing it.
All right.
Have a good one,
now.
everybody.
I don't know about you, but after seeing Gordon and Jean's layout, I'm itching to operate some trains. Our next clinic will do just that. The next clinic is called Let's Learn to Operate Local Train POFR for the Beginner. Our presenter began his lifelong affair with trains with the receipt of a Marx train set at Christmas when he was just 12 years old. Even though his father was a sailor and he spent his growing up years on the Herreshoff ketch he built in the backyard, the trains remained a core interest. His first layout was an L-shaped affair using a 4x8 sheet of plywood, butted to another 3x6 piece of plywood. That layout endured from 1958 through 1966 in his parents' basement until he left for the military. The Valley Junction Railroad was begun in 1988 as an operations-oriented layout, with the first operating session held in 1994. Today, the Valley Junction hosts op sessions monthly with a crew of 8 operating on a schedule under dispatcher authority. The Valley Junction will be on the op session list for the NER Mill City 2021 convention coming in October 2021. Please welcome Hub Division member Bruce Robinson.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this clinic. What we're going to try to accomplish here is to allay fear. Most people that come to an operating session and have not had any experience with it have faced intimidation, if you will. And here on the Valley Junction, we have a way of dealing with that. What we like to do is take a new person and put them right into the thick of it, usually under the guidance of one of the regular members. But the whole idea is we know that you're going to be intimidated, you're going to be scared, you're going to say, oh no, I can't do this, it's too complicated. It takes about 15 minutes and all that just goes away. And this presentation is going to show you how we do that. So let's get started. And this is primarily aimed for a first-time operator. I was asked to do this presentation to keep it short and sweet. So here we go. Operating session of the Valley Junction Railroad. I love this quote. This is from Frank Ellison, and if you're an old timer in the hobby, you'd recognize his name. He was in theater, and his layout was an O-scale set up for operations, and he was from New Orleans. A famous quote from his book says, the operating schedule. Present the drama of model railroading in which the tracks are the stage, the buildings and scenery are the setting, the trains are the actors, and the operating schedule, that's the plot. What we're going to be touching on here tonight is primarily 4 general topics. One is train makeup. Next one is train handling. Waybills, the dreaded waybill, which is used for routing freight cars. And most importantly, how to have fun at an operating session. Why operate? Why do we do this game we call operating? I have built my model railroad. Now what do I do? I've heard that many times over the years. I keep reading all those articles in the model press, and it kind of piques my interest. Maybe it's something I could do. A friend invited me to an operating session. Man, that's how I got into this deal about 1972. I like the challenge of solving a puzzle. I've always looked at operating sessions as a puzzle. I break it down into simple pieces, work each piece until it's completed, and then I get a complete picture of what I just did. I saw operating sessions included in the NMRA events. You just heard Chuck say that the Valley Junction Railroad is going to be participating in the op sessions for the 2021 convention here in Mill City 2021. This railroad has participated in a whole lot of different events. Rail Run is an annual event that's been going for 30 some odd years, for example. Division and regional type things that railroad has been open for. Individuals have been invited, groups have been invited, clubs. So all of that is exposure to the operating scheme that we do here. And then the biggie, and this is the one I like the best. I want to earn my NMI Chief Dispatcher Certificate. If you guys watched Keely's presentation on who earned all their achievements this past year, the last slide showed a young lady sitting at my dispatcher's desk, which is behind me. That's Brenna Whitney. She was the last one that was awarded her Chief Dispatcher Award. This railroad has produced 6 of them so far, and we're kind of proud of that. Okay, now let's see what we need to do to get started on running a local train here on this railroad called POFR. POFR, that stands for the first 2 letters of Portsmouth, that's its point of origin. The second last 2 is Franklin, that's its point of termination. So POFR goes from Portsmouth to Franklin on the Valley Junction Railroad. Train makeup and train handling. At first, this may seem a really intimidating process, but it's quite simple and it really makes your job a whole lot easier if it's done well. I love to do this. This presentation has been done several times before. And to stress the point, the locomotive goes on the front, the caboose on the rear, and all other cars go in between. Yes, I have had people push a local train halfway around my basement caboose first, with the caboose in the middle, with the engine in the middle, and any combination thereabouts. It just doesn't look right, and it's not the way this railroad is set up. Block cars by destination. This is extremely important. This railroad is a point-to-point system. This yard's at both ends with classification tracks. It's vital that those cars that are put into a specific train are put in station order. If they're not, it causes a lot of delays for the poor crew that has to shuffle these things, with cars all around when they get out on the road. So if the cars are blocked, it makes their job very smooth. You put the setouts on the head pin, and you put the pickups on the rear pin. And we like to use the analogy here of a freight train is like a file cabinet. You pull the drawer out and you look inside and you see all the folders. We like to, and the analogy being those folders are the cars. The ones the furthest into the folder are going to be your setouts close to the locomotive. The ones closest to the door is going to be your pickups. Those are the ones that go on the caboose. And as the train moves from point to point to point, those cars keep moving forward until you get all your pickups and you go home. Think before every move and then make as few moves as possible. I'm having coordination problems here. Okay, think before. Goes without saying. It'll save a lot of time and a lot of effort. It's easy to think twice and move once. And you'll find a serious benefit for that as we go through. Don't foul the main. Leave the path open for other trains to go through. This is what you might call awareness, aware of what's going on around you. This railroad here is a point-to-point system, single track main line with passing sidings. So if the local decides to occupy all available track on the passing siding, it creates the blockage for other trains that have to get through there. But the track plan is laid out so that you always have a path if you keep your wits about you. And it's not difficult. Use the offset mode on kitty couplers. This makes it really simple. If you open the jaws out on the main line and you're going to push into a siding, you just offset the couplers, push, locomotive backs out, leaves the car right where you want it. Very, very handy, and besides, it protects a lot of the damage on scenery. Operate trains at prototypical speeds. That's important because this railroad runs on a schedule. It runs on a 24-hour schedule on a 6-to-1 fast clock. The speeds are set so that if it's in the right speeds at the right time, everything's in harmony. So prototype speeds even look good. So it's kind of like, keep that in mind thing. Listen to the dispatcher. Dispatcher, we use radio control, like a lot of railroads do, and the dispatcher will give you clearances. He'll give you a clearance from point A to point B. You have to really understand the dispatcher is looking at the big picture. He's looking at multiple trains and trying to make sure that they get to where they're going, keeping them safely apart from one another and all that. So if he says you're clear from point A to point B, that's what you prepare for, from A to B. He did not say C, he said B. And so if you listen carefully, he will give you that instruction, and You don't have an option anyway because the dispatcher controls all the turnouts on the main line. And the last piece, the most important one of all, is the one we started with. The locomotive goes on the front and the caboose on the rear, and all the cars go in between. We use train instruction cards here. What you're seeing is two sides. The smaller one on the left of your screen, this is a yard instructions. This describes to the yard master the makeup of that particular train. It has some pertinent information on it. You see at the very top, it says POFR Max Cars 10. Gives you a locomotive number. This is a Valley Junction Railroad RS11 number 225. And then it gives you a car capacity of all the industries that particular train will work. So it says Columbia Granite, that can handle 2 cars. You can't get 3 in there. There's a law of physics that says it can't do that, but 2 will fit. So if you have a car in the yard that goes to Columbia Granite, you can put it into this train. And I get asked all the time, if I add up all these numbers, it means it's more than 10. Yeah, that's right, it does. So you got to understand that if you have a mass car life of 10 and you have 3 Columbia Granite destinations, one of them is going to stay in the yard. It's as simple as that. It's okay to leave it behind. Then the other cars will be made up until you reach that maximum of 10. 10 is determined, by the way, about the length of my passing sidings. So we have figured out that if we keep this train to 10 cars or less, he can operate on his schedule and gets everything done in the allocated time. And then I did this in red, block the cars for Tiverton, Franklin, and the Valley Branch Lines interchange. Those cars should be in that order in the train before it leaves the yard. The one that we're really interested in on this presentation here tonight is the other side of that card, which is the crew instructions. It says your train is POFR, your max car is a 10, the locomotive number is 225, which obviously your DCC at that address. It says you're going to leave Portsmouth, that's the yard. You're going to pick up and set off cars at local industries in Tiverton. Now it gives you an exception here, except the granite cars, which are at a finishing shed, and the milk car. Those 2 cars, the granite cars and the milk car, they operate on different trains. They're not included in this one, so bypass them. And then you're going to go to Franklin Team Track, and then you're going to set out interchange cars at Thornton on the Valley Branch Lines. You're going to pick up any interchange cars from the Valley Branch Lines, and you're going to return back to your port of origin, which is Portsmouth. So in essential, this little local here is a turn job. It starts in Portsmouth and it finishes in Portsmouth. Okay, the yard master has assembled our train, handed over the instruction card and waybills. Now we check the schedule for the departure time and we double check the waybills. Always keep in mind what the waybills are telling you. They're very, very simple, but they provide you with a lot of information. Okay, check our schedule. We see in red our train is POFR. We see it leaves at 9:15 in the morning out of Portsmouth. It's due back in Portsmouth at 12:15. So the whole duration of that run is about 3 scale hours. This is a one-line diagram of what the Valley Junction Railroad is all about. It's a single track main line with passing sidings. Goes from Portsmouth to Valley Junction and passing through Tiverton, Franklin, and Canterbury. Along the way, there's interchange with 3 other railroads, Boston and Maine Railroad, RJ Tower, the Valley Branch Lines, which is at Franklin, which we're interested in. And then at the far western end, it'll interchange with Central Vermont Railroad. From these names, you should draw the conclusion by now, but this railroad is set in New England, and the era is about 1960. So if you stretch this track plan of railroad out, this is what it looks like. So little red arrows are going to show us what route that Beaufort is going to take. Portsmouth, Tiverton, the Franklin, interchange with Valley Branch Lines, excuse me, back to Tiverton, and then back to Portsmouth. The crew. The Valley Junction Railroad runs with a crew of 8. We have a yardmaster at Portsmouth, yardmaster at Valley Junction. That's the two ends of the railroad. We have a Valley Branch Lines operator, which is about the center of the railroad. That's a branch line. It, like its parent, is also point to point. Look around the basement, you'll see 4 turntables here. The turntables obviously mark the ends of those single tracks. There's 4 mainline crews. One of these crews will run Profer, and that's what we're talking about here tonight. And then, of course, we have a dispatcher. I mentioned earlier that if you looked at the last slide of the recipients of the awards, you would have seen Brenna Whitney sitting at my dispatcher's desk. This photograph shows Brenna and Dad. One of the first sessions she was here. She was only 10 years old. So we have really the pleasure of having this young lady with us for the last about 11 years. And she is very proficient at what she does. So the Polford train crew, it picks up their assigned train from a departing yard. They receive the way bills from the yard master. They call the dispatcher for permission to leave the yard limits. They make their pickups and setouts as described in the train instructions, which you'll see here. This one is the Montrealer, which is a first-class passenger train. Communications with dispatcher via the headsets. You can see it on Brenda's head there. And then it'll terminate at your arrival yard. You turn the waybills over to the yard master, and then it's time for coffee. This is what makes the system work. This is the heart of the system. This is a waybill system that I was introduced to in about 1972. It had been around for a few years then. To this day, you are still using it on an operating system. Micromart makes the same waybill. They're identical in function. They look different, but the function is identical. This is a waybill pocket. This has the information of the particular car. In this case, it's a covered hopper car number 336. And in that little, it's a coin envelope, you're going to put routing slips. The first one is a pink one. It says Portsmouth and has the name of industry on it. And then you can put, in this case, Valley Branch Lines is an interchange card, is the first white one. And then it tells you on the Valley Branch Lines that that particular car is going to go to East Thornton. When they put them on it, we put them all together, you slide them inside the pocket, and this is what it looks like, the completed waybill that you see on the far right of the screen. Important point, how the system works is the waybill moves first, and the car follows it. And they always have to stay in step. If they get out of step, no problem there either, because this system is so simple, it's self-healing. So the next operating session, if the car happens to be in the wrong place, nobody knows. It just has a new destination and off it goes. What we're going to do is highlight one particular move. This one is that same hopper car. The waybill was destined for Farmers Co-op. So on the upper left-hand picture, you see the industry. This is the industry of Farmers Co-op in this town of Tiverton. That car, VJ number 336, is going to be destined there. The waybills get the car to this point. We use waybill pockets on the fascia around the layout. We like a little bit of humor that goes on with what we do. These are really classified as waybill ejection systems. They're hinged at the bottom, and they have a magnet at the top. And ask me how I know this. If you don't hold on to that pocket when you open it and you pivot on the hinge, it pops out there like it was on a rubber band. And then you're playing 52 pickup and putting all the waybills and now it's scattered all over the floor. The yards, which is a small picture in the upper right-hand corner here, they have a little slightly different thing because they're all classification tracks, so they're ordered in tiers, if you were. So they're easily matched between where the waybills are located in the pocket. and the classification tracks that the car itself is actually sitting on. So in our little example, we're going down here to Farmers Co-op in Tiverton, and you can see these are the waybills that the car had been delivered, had been put into the pocket, and the waybill had been turned. So you're ready for the next outbound move. Each and every industry all over the basement has one of these little pockets. Kind of think about it as a filing cabinet. We've covered all the background information needed to run train POFR. So let's take the train out on the road, take care of business. Check the paperwork before the departure. This is what the crew will get from the yardmaster. You have your instruction card. So in this case, we're running train POFR. We have waybills, and these have been blocked. The cars are the 6 cars here, and 3 of them are going to go to Tiverton, and 3 of them are going to go to interchange with the Valley branch lines. So it's a pretty straightforward and pretty simple run for us here tonight. This is Portsmouth. From locomotive to caboose, you'll see locomotives. My standard freight engine is an RS-11, and they're assigned to their trains by cab number. So I know if train locomotive 225 happens to go by me, and I'm standing out there in the basement someplace, I know immediately what train it is. It's POFR. So every train leaves with a caboose in one end and a locomotive in the other, and all the cars in between. And these have been blocked. So the first 3 are going to be handled at Tiverton. That's the first place we come to. And the second 3 will go to Valley branch lines for interchange purposes. All of this preparation work was done by the yardmaster before the train crew locals have handled this area. This is Valley Junction Railroad's main line is set up so that there's a